This leads our bulletin this hour. The Madlanga Commission of Inquiry has heard how suspended Deputy National Police Commissioner General Shadrack Sibiya interfered with the investigations of the 121 dockets. Now, this is according to evidence leader Adv Adil Hassim. She's senior counsel who's cross-examining General Sibiya at the Madlanga Commission in Pretoria today. Now, various witnesses at the commission have testified how the seizure of the 121 dockets of the political killings task team resulted in investigations being delayed. SABC News reporter Canny Maphanga is following proceedings for us at the Commission and joins us live with the very latest. A very good afternoon to you, Canny. We've heard quite a lot insofar as that decision to immediately or activate a plan to immediately disband the PKTT. And there was a back and forth around interpretation as to whether the National Commissioner had instructed for that plan to be activated. And we heard a Shadrack Sibiya that insists what he saw in that letter was in fact an instruction. Take us through that.
Indeed. Good afternoon to you, Mfundo, and to the viewers at home. We remain sharply focused on the fallout following that directive to disband the PKTT immediately from the vantage point of the actions of Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya once that announcement was made. Earlier this morning, they did ventilate the transfer of the 121 dockets and the implications thereof, which meant that there was a travesty of justice and interference, because once those dockets moved, then they stayed in that repository for about 3 to 5 months with nothing taking place in those particular dockets. Now, as Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya struggled to articulate what the intention was, or rather explain why he disagreed with the assertion that if they sat there for 3 months, then surely investigations will be stalled and those dockets would not see any movement, because they would have moved from the KZN headquarters, including those active cases that were actually currently in the courts as they speak of that particular moment. He later conceded that although it's not his fault, that he conceded that in general that was a travesty of justice. But it seems that on the point of taking responsibility for the possible role he could have played in that particular travesty of justice, I think the Commission had a bit of a difficulty there with trying to get that concession. But he agreed from a neutrality perspective that if the docket sat there for 3 months, then the only implication is that they weren't being worked on, detectives did not have access to them, and those dockets were not going to court. So effectively what took place is that those investigations were stalled for at least 3 months, and there's no explanation as to why. Now, currently, before we quickly adjourn for lunch, the focus has been on this deactivation letter, which has been placed before the Commission as something Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya did out of his own doing. So he had no instructions. He took it upon himself, allegedly, to carry out the directive of the Police Minister, Senzo. Now, this must always be read within the context of the rushed manner of approach that was taken in the deactivation plan, or the winding down plan, in the context of this is taking place just after December, when the PKTT supporting counterintelligence are now pouncing on 2 individuals, namely alleged cartel member Katiso Katie Malefe and alleged cartel member Vusimuzi Kat Matlala, who are alleged to be in close proximity, according to the allegations of Lieutenant General Kwanazi, to not only the police minister but the suspended Deputy National Commissioner. So that is the context upon which you read this deactivation letter. Now, Sibiya seeks to advance to the Commission that at all times he was acting according to the ministerial directive and what followed. However, he struggles to pinpoint any support from the National Commissioner's office outside of this claim that because General Rabi, who is in the office of the National Commissioner, assisted him with that letter, then that meant that the National Commissioner was in on it. But there is other evidence before the Commission which suggests that the National Commissioner never supported Sibiya going out with his own directives. In fact, he rejected his implementation plan twice, and then a third act followed, which is then this particular letter that goes on to state that those dockets must be transferred, they must be moved, and it must be done so in a quick fashion. So we're seeing Sibiya struggle quite extensively with the actual hard evidence on the ground in relation to the claims, or rather the assertions that he makes, that all of these actions were done in accordance with the ministerial directive, and then of course they were acting together with the National Commissioner. We expect that several of those probing questions will continue after the lunch adjournment at 2 p.m. when he returns on the stand for the third day of testimony, which is cross-examination of his evidence in chief. Over to you in studio.
All right, Canny, thank you very much for that reportage. That's SABC News reporter Canny Maphanga there.